Hey, welcome to Movement Church. Thanks for coming and checking us out here online. My name is Josh Tandy. I'm one of the pastors here at Movement, and I'm just so glad that you made time for this this Sunday morning. We're going to be doing some things here together, and we would love for you to engage with us. We'd love for you to sing along, to follow along in the scriptures, to comment and let us know that you're here. And we'd love for you to share this message, share this video clip and this video live stream out there with your friends and your friend group, because we want to share this. We want to be people of good news. We want to help people find and follow Jesus. So right now, in the comment section, as we get started, man, I'd love to hear from you something good. Something that's been good in your life in the midst of some real hardship and some grief and loss and all of the things that are going on worldwide. I still believe God is at work and there's still good things. So we're not going to minimize or downplay the stuff that is hard, but right now, let's just encourage one another. What are some good things that are happening in your life? What are some good things you're seeing other people do and experience? Or maybe what are those causes or those organizations or those businesses that are out there doing good work still? Let's give them some love and let's encourage one another with that. So go ahead and do that in the comment section right now. But again, my name is Josh. I'm so glad that you're here, and thanks for worshiping with us here at Movement Church.
Greatness stars they wept, the morning sun was dead, the Savior of the world was fallen. His body on the cross, his blood poured out for us, the weight of every curse upon him. One final breath he gave as heaven looked away. The Son of God was laid in darkness. A battle in the grave, the war on death was waged. The power of hell forever broken. The ground began to shake, the stone was rolled away. His perfect love could not be overcome. Now death, where is your sting? Our resurrected King has rendered you defeated. Now forever he is glorified. Forever he is lifted high. Forever he is risen. He is alive. He is alive. The ground began to shake, the stone was rolled away. His reckless love could not be overcome. Now death, where is your sting? Our resurrected King has rendered you defeated. Now forever he is glorified. Forever he is lifted high. Forever he is risen. He is alive. He is alive. We sing hallelujah. We sing hallelujah. We sing hallelujah. The Lamb has overcome. We sing hallelujah. We sing hallelujah. We sing hallelujah. The Lamb has overcome. We sing hallelujah. We sing hallelujah. We sing hallelujah. And now death, where is your sting? Our resurrected King is overcome. He's overcome.
So today we're looking at the story of a prophet from the Bible named Elijah. And Elijah has this incredible public event, this showdown with these enemies of God. And in the aftermath, Elijah becomes a hunted man, and he runs. And I want to read to you from 1 Kings chapter 19, starting in verse 3. 1 Kings chapter 19, starting in verse 3. What happens when Elijah runs? Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went to a cave and spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Hey, thanks again for checking things out here at Movement Church Online. I'm so glad that you're here. In the midst of all this new reality, I think that we all have to be open to this, because I believe that even things like this, even though it's online, is still crucially important in terms of us helping one another find and follow Jesus. So right now, there in the comments section, I would love for you to answer this simple question. What are you doing that you're enjoying outside? What are those outside activities that you really enjoy right now? Maybe for you, you have found that you really love going and taking a walk. Or maybe you've really gotten into managing your lawn, or planting flowers, or pulling weeds. Maybe you've got a garden going, all kinds of things. Maybe you just look for an excuse to get the kids out of the house. I don't know about you, but my family, we found that that is something that we have to do. We have to get outside at least once a day to kind of get some energy out, but really, we find it to be incredibly restful to get outside. And thankfully we can do that and still be safe and honor what we're trying to do here. Is we're trying to love our neighbors through this. But what we're finding is that outside work can be incredibly restful. So that's kind of our story for today. We're looking at Elijah, this prophet who comes on the scene with all of these big moments. And the scripture that was just read comes after maybe the biggest moment. See, Elijah was this prophet of God, and the kingdom of Israel has been split in two. The nation has been split in two. And to the north is Israel, and to the south is Judah, and Elijah's in the north. And the king of Israel, King Ahab, has married a queen named Jezebel. Now, Jezebel was a foreigner, and she brought with her all these foreign gods, these prophets of Baal, this fertility god that they worshipped, with very barbaric ways of doing so. And so what happens is there's this big showdown. Elijah's kind of the last man standing, the last prophet of God, and he invites all these prophets of Baal to come and to this mountaintop, and they're going to make altars. They're going to make these sacrifices. And essentially, Elijah sets the scene. He says, okay, you prophets of Baal, you take all of your bull carcasses, you put them on these giant altars and make it of wood, and let's pour oil over this. Let's make it incredibly flammable, and then call out to your God to ignite this offering. Well, they do this, and they go through all of their histrionics and just kind of this whole production of trying to do this. They're calling out to God. Elijah even kind of pokes fun out of them, makes fun of them, and says that maybe your gods are asleep. Maybe you need to yell louder. And then he says, well, now it's my turn. And so he digs a trench, a circular trench, almost like a moat, and he places a carcass there, and he fills that moat with water, and he pours water all over this bull carcass, and then he quietly prays out to God, and the the altar, and that carcass is ignited with a bolt of lightning. And it's this incredibly gruesome scene that follows where Elijah essentially slaughters all of these prophets of Baal. And you might be thinking, wow, that's really dark or really grim. Yeah, I know, but this is a story in the Bible of an ancient people interacting with God. And in their time and their understanding, they had to eliminate this threat. And the prophets of Baal were not innocent. They would often do barbaric things, including human sacrifice, including child sacrifice. And they would pervert sexuality to worship their gods. It was dark all around. And what we find is right in the aftermath of this, Elijah goes on the run. See, what has happened is Jezebel, the queen, has heard that all of her prophets have been slaughtered by Elijah, and she puts a price on his head. She says to him, "You're as good as dead. I'm coming after you." And so Elijah retreats. He goes on the run. And in this series, Wilderness, we've been talking about how in the Bible, when people are forced out, when they're pushed away, and they go into isolation by their own choosing or because of circumstances or what have you, they find that in those moments, God speaks to them, God does something in their life that is profound. And Elijah is exactly like that. So Elijah is overwhelmed. He's running, and what we find in these stories, these patterns that sometimes people run out of shame, like Moses did. Sometimes I think people will run and will feel like we need to give into these big emotions of fear or anxiety or anger or hatred. And I think David wrestled with that when he was on the run from King Saul. And here Elijah is running, I think, because he is overwhelmed. He is in absolute despair at what's coming after him. I'd love for you to share this in your answer to this question in the comments. When you are overwhelmed, what do you do? What do you do when you are overwhelmed? I know for me that sometimes it's just easy to seek something easy, seek comfort in things that are just a distraction, right? Food or entertainment or whatever, just something mindless. I think there's other times where we might play the blame game. You know, we're overwhelmed, so we're going to blame someone else for our situation. Or we play the avoidance game. We're not just going to talk about it. We're not going to deal with what's facing us. Or we look for the quick fix, right? We think that if we just do this, then everything will be fine. And I think we all know in those moments where we feel like we are overwhelmed, it can push us into despair. Now, maybe that was your answer. When you're overwhelmed, you just feel hopeless. You just feel like there's no path forward. Despair tells us that we are out of options, right? Despair tells us there's no tomorrow, that all of our plans, there's no hope, and that we are on our own. Despair is this huge, dark lie. I think about times in my life when plans haven't gone as I had laid them out, where with career or with my family and things just didn't quite go as expected. And it's really hard for me in those moments to find the positive. I can kind of really dwell on the negative. Or maybe you know what that overwhelming and that despair feeling feels like when tragedy strikes, when the grief is almost oppressive. When you feel like the addiction is so strong that that's the only thing that matters. When betrayal has been so real that you think it is hopeless to ever trust anyone again. We're overwhelmed and we feel this despair, and we are telling ourselves over and over and over again that we can't do it. Now, in that scripture that we read there, that I love, that the first thing that God does is he meets Elijah's basic needs with food and water and rest. I love that Elijah is running. He's overwhelmed. He's fearful for his life. He kind of holes up in a cave. And, well, even before he gets to the cave, he says he's hiding under this broom tree, right? And it's kind of this shrub. It's very low to the ground. So he's crawled under this. He's in the dirt. And angels bring him food and water. Now, we all know what it's like when we feel overwhelmed, that sometimes we need a break, right? We need a healthy break. So for you, what is that? What is that healthy break for you? What is that thing that you do that can kind of help you step away, help you process, help you kind of gain perspective and even rest well What does that look like for you when you're overwhelmed? I know for me that it's kind of counterintuitive, but I need to go do something. I need to go outside and do something productive. I make jokes, and I've talked about this a lot, and you guys make jokes about it, is that I love to split firewood, right? Like it's a very mindless, very physical thing that I can just do. I know I put an X amount of time, I'm gonna get X amount of result, right? Because sometimes in life, we put things into something. We put effort and time and resources, and there's not a guarantee that it's gonna turn out well. It's not gonna guarantee that we're gonna get back what we put in. Maybe that's for you. Maybe you just need to rest. I love that beautiful image that the God of the universe deals with Elijah's physical needs first. If you're a parent, you know what this is like, right? You know that there are times where you'll get this big outburst from your kid. And well, maybe they just need to take a break. Maybe they need a nap. Maybe they need a sandwich, right? Like maybe they just need something else. That the outburst isn't what it's really about. And I love that God, in this little moment, we have this little detail, this incredible scene where angels are attending to Elijah, not removing the threat, not giving him purpose, that will come later, but giving him exactly what he needs in that moment. If our God is a loving father, of course, a good father will put a kid in timeout, will make them take a break. If our God is like that, but perfect, our God forces us to take a break sometimes. It's called Sabbath. It's called rest. And it's not just laying around. It could be actually doing something, but it's a time to be restored. It's a time to reflect. It's a time to appreciate. It's a time of rest, intentionally godly rest. See, Elijah's life up to this point had been full of very public, very big things. He's performed miracles. We just talked about that incredible showdown with the prophets of Baal. He is somebody who is known, and he sees God in the big, big stuff. And in this moment, I think that he is kind of overwhelmed. The overwhelmed and despair has come because there has been so much where he has just had to be on, where it's just been so big and showy. And it gets to this point where he can't take it anymore. He is done. So God speaks to Elijah, and he tells him as he's hiding in this cave that he's supposed to wait for his presence. And in this moment, in this cave moment, God tells him to go stand at the mouth of the cave, and he's standing at the mouth of the cave, and this huge storm comes, but the scriptures say that God was not in the storm. And then there's this huge earthquake, and the rocks shake, and the ground just trembles, but Elijah says that God is not in that. And then there's this huge consuming inferno, this huge fire, but God is not in that. And then it says that there's this gentle whisper. Some translations, maybe you're more familiar with this phrasing, a still, small voice of God. I think God is teaching Elijah here that it's not always the big thing. It's always the showy thing. It's not always the thing that gets all the attention. That's not what it's really about. It's ultimately about connecting. That still small voice that gives us confidence, gives us peace, gives us this assurance that what we're doing or the decision in front of us is right or is wrong. This idea that we are okay, that we are not alone. Maybe you think about this as like an intuition or a gut feeling. I would contend that most of the time, these are things of God. That these are things of God leading us forward to something better. As if we're followers of Jesus, we have access to this. So let me ask you this. Maybe it wasn't audible. Maybe it wasn't, this huge, what came before was this earthquake and this fire and this storm. Maybe it didn't have all that, but what has it been like when you have experienced that still small voice? Have you heard that still small voice? I would imagine if we all think about it, we could say yes. We all think about it, yeah, there's been times where there's been a big decision or I just felt like I needed to do something, and it probably wasn't this big thing. It probably wasn't this huge deal, but it was just this moment where we felt like this is the right thing to do. And maybe the things that come to mind were big moments because God speaks in the big and the small moments. Maybe it was with a career change or a relationship. I know for me, it's starting Movement Church and moving away from home and coming to a new place to start a new church for no other reason than I felt that God was telling me to. It was that still, small voice moment. I think Jesus is sending us his Spirit to speak to us. And the question is, are we listening? Are we listening to what God has for us? See, we can't only look to the big noisy events to try to discern what it looks like for us to follow Jesus. We can't just rely on our emotions. We can't just rely on circumstances, but we can rely on God to speak to us. So in the midst of this, my challenge to myself and to you is to listen, to seek out that still small voice, because I believe that the primary way that God speaks to us now is through things like that still small voice. Yes, God can speak through the big events, and we can look at what's happening around us and say, what is God doing here? But I think far more often, God is coming to us in that still small voice. Because even though many of us are spending a lot more time at home than we were. That 2 months ago, job was more regular, the kids went to school, we could go out to eat, all those sorts of things that aren't present for us. We're spending far more time at home. And others of you are spending far more time at work. We so thank you for that. But wherever we are, I think we've got just as much noise in our life. Because it's not about activity or inactivity, it's about the noise. It's about how we are allowing the noise to control our lives. So if we're going to listen, we have to ask God, and then we have to stop talking. So here's my question for you. Are you comfortable with silence? Are you comfortable with those long, awkward pauses? I know for me, I'm not. I'm the guy that's got headphones in, that's listening to something that's always got background music or background noise or something on the TV. I'm the one that's got incredible kids at home who are not quiet. I know that I'm not always comfortable with the silence. But what I see in this story of Elijah is that God speaks in the quiet. To persist as Elijah does, when he realizes that God is not in the storm, he's not in the earthquake, he's not in the fire, to persist, to still seek out God, to still listen. Because this is what we see, that this is what we see with how Jesus interacts with us now. This is how we see Jesus interacting with us now, is through his Spirit. And that still small voice, that was God's Spirit. And Jesus offers us that. See, Elijah could have left that moment after that storm or after that fire or earthquake and just responded by saying, look how powerful God is. And he would be right, but only partially. We can seek out the attributes of God. We can find God's wisdom, God's love, God's power, the power of service and volunteering and generosity. We can see how putting others first connects us with God's character. We can seek out productive work. We can see all those good things, but miss the most important thing. See, Jesus says that he gives us his Spirit as a counsel, as a guide, but more than that, so that he can reside with us. The Apostle John puts it this way, that when Jesus came to earth, this was God coming to earth. Jesus essentially says later that if he leaves, his Spirit will come so that he can always be with us. The Apostle Paul will later come along and say, and reflect on this and describe followers of Jesus as new little mini temples. Because in the temple, that is where the presence of God resided. And now we are all able to carry that presence. See, we can talk about God's power, God's love. We're right. These are incredible things. We can talk about God's justice and how he wants something to be right for the world. But we'd be right. But if we stop there, we'd be like Elijah, just going to the next big thing and ultimately just facing that overwhelmed and despair moment again. Because Elijah does get marching orders. He does get purpose moving forward after the gentle whisper, that still small voice. He gets that. But he only gets that because he listens. The Spirit of God exists to lead and to counsel and direct you, to show you what it looks like to follow the ways of Jesus. But the Spirit of God's primary purpose, in my understanding, is to connect with you, to be present with you, to fight against that lie that says you're alone. The presence of God, the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit coming to us guides, directs, but also takes care of us, is present. It shows us the way forward. So how do we listen? How do we hear? What do we do? We ask, and then we stop talking. We persist until we can shut up all the other noises and hear that still, small voice. Let's pray. God, I pray, I beg, I ask, I plead that your presence would be real to me, that your presence, your Spirit would be real to all. That God, that you would show us how to quiet and how to listen. Not just so we can get things done, not just so we can have a better understanding, but that we can connect with you. That ultimately you came to us to be with us. You came close to be close. That your love is not here just to show us a better way. It is to be with us in that better way. So God, I pray that you would show up. That you would speak, and then beyond all of that, because I know you're showing up, I know you're speaking, you would teach us how to listen. We ask all these things in your Son's name. Amen. Here in a moment, right now actually, we're going to take communion. Communion for us at Movement Church is a really important moment. For us, we celebrate with pieces of bread and a glass of juice and whatever you have there at hand at home, that'll work just fine. And we remember back to the Last Supper, that Thursday before Good Friday, before Easter Sunday, when Jesus gathers his closest friends for a Passover meal that he is going to add on to in terms of meaning. And what we can read, particularly in John's account of this, is that it was kind of a raucous event. Not that it was like a big party, but there was a lot of conversation happening. There were a lot of things happening. There were arguments about who was greater and who would kind of be in charge of this or that and how things would get divvied up in terms of power. There was kind of this incredible moment where Jesus washes the feet of Peter, and as this very normal, hospitable act of service and love was overlooked. There's this kind of standoff and confrontation between Jesus and Judas about the betrayal. And I think as people were just starting to realize there's something else going on here, as I think about the other 11 that were left, they think there's something going on here, and they have all these questions welling up. They're about to just kind of give in and barrage Jesus with all these questions, he takes a loaf of bread. He breaks it. He passes it around. He says, whenever you eat of this, do it in remembrance of me. And he pours out wine. He passes a cup around. He says, whenever you drink of this, do this in remembrance of me. And in that moment, Jesus stops all the questions, all the noise. And he says, come back to this. I'm about to do something that you need to pay attention to. You need to remember. You need to celebrate. I'm about to give my life for you. So right there in your homes, go ahead and take communion right now. And let this be a moment where you stop. You listen. And you remember. Go ahead and do that right now. Well, thanks again for being here and making this part of your Sunday. Yeah, this is weird still, right? This is still kind of odd not to have you all and be able to speak to you face to face here in this building. But it's still church. It's still an opportunity for us to come together and help people find and follow Jesus. So this is what I'm going to ask. If you're new, for some reason you've stumbled upon this, your friend shared it, or you were searching for a church and you came across this one, man, first off, thanks for giving us a shot, really. But would you hang around? Would you kind of make yourself known? We do a virtual lobby on a Zoom call, and the link will be in the comment section right now. And it's just a time to see faces, talk a little bit about what I just shared, and pray together. And man, that's just a great way to meet somebody new. So if you're new, if you're one of those people, we'd love for you to jump in on that. If you're new, we'd love for you to kind of reach out to us. Let us know that you stopped by so that we can connect with you, so that we can help you. Our only motive here is to help you find and follow Jesus. And if there's anything we can do to do that, man, let us know. So I'll wrap up here and we'll go over to that virtual lobby and hope you can hang out with us there. If you call Movement Church home, we'd invite you to give. Of course, you can give online. You can mail physical checks here to the building. But that's just another way to worship, another way to be generous, and to declare that, man, all of this is God's, and we've been entrusted with it. So if that's you, man, thank you for that. Ask you to just continue to watch our social media stuff. We'll be hanging out with you throughout the week, and of course, we'll be back together next Sunday. But man, this week, find some time to get some quiet. Ask God to show up and to speak, and then stop talking. We'll see you later. Bye.